Welcome to another edition of From the Vault from Las Vegas. We have Rich from GlobalStake. GlobalStake has been a great partner with us here at BitGo, and we're looking forward to having you on.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
So we always like to start these off of understanding a little bit about your story personally and how you got into the industry. Staking has been a dynamic part of the industry, for a while now. I feel like since the really Ethereum flip to proof of stake. And so tell us a little bit
about it. So I'm a long-time telecom guy. That's actually where I cut my teeth in telecom. I was very involved in a lot of the restructurings and on the board of a lot of the big fiber companies and telcos in the 2000 period when the internet was really born, and did technology deals and telecom deals along the 2000 to 2019 timeframe. And then and I dabbled in crypto, of course, but then in about 2019, I sort of wanted to dig into crypto full speed. I raised a small fund to sort of like do small technology investments and learn about investing in crypto, but pretty quickly realized that my telecom background and the staking infrastructure and Web3 infrastructure generally, not just staking, really was a good match, and that you could actually build a business there that was resilient. And the thing I noticed was that most of the providers there that had started to get scale were built sort of from the move fast and break things mentality that built SaaS companies in sort of Silicon Valley, right? And so I took a telecom-centric approach, and together with a couple of partners, built GlobalStake 100% bare metal with our own footprint, our own network layer, the way telecoms are built. And we targeted institutions from day one, knowing that things like SOC compliance and risk management and these things were going to really matter as the larger institutions started to enter the space.
How was that adapting to the institutional side? Because there was a point when staking really started to come on the scene. I feel like, and it's essential for the protocols to really allow them to operate, right?
Yeah.
But institutions can look at it and say, who owns the asset? Who deploys? Is there investment manager involved? Is this technically a securities transaction?
That's right. And I think
how did you handle that?
So I think it's my prior background before this, I was a securities lawyer. So that actually gave me a good filter to sort of understand sort of where the things really where the proper filters should be applied. And I think the truth is that we're only now getting to the phase where truly institutional questions are being asked. In crypto, very commonly, institution equals large allocator.
Yeah.
And in the world that I come from, our data center, we have Goldman Sachs next to us in the cage. Like that's real, that's serious institutional capital. It's not just the size.
Yeah.
It's the compliance requirements, it's the business operations standards, it's all of those things that go into supporting other people's money at a large scale, right? So from our perspective, we started with that and then developed some Web3 nativity, along the way. But it's a balance because they almost are two very different, worlds. The crypto native universe is beginning to intersect with the large capital, and that's the intersection point that we sit at from a risk management perspective when it comes to, the bare metal, the final layer. The node infrastructure. And obviously partners like BitGo represent a layer on top of what we do.
Yeah.
Attacking the same thing.
I want to take a step back and talk a little bit about when you telecom into where you're at today. When you made that jump and you had to build this company within crypto, and crypto individuals themselves are a little bit different than most industries, right?
Yeah.
But we're all human. And so what was that like building the team, trying to understand how to tap foundations, protocols, work with custodians, because it's a wide range of individuals.
It's hard to manage the diversity of personalities, right? That's a daily exercise for sure. Getting the right alchemy together. That's actually, I think my original title at the company was Chief Alchemist, because I knew that you had to put all these diverse things together, right? I'd say, there's a familiarity to telecom in that there's a translation. The language is so hard to keep up with, right? Like it's very hard for folks to understand what is MEV. You talk to most institutions, that even institutions that are actively custodying with BitGo or staking with GlobalStake, they don't even know what MEV is, right?
Yeah.
Yet it's such a critical part of the economics of these chains as they begin to build. And so I think that there's a lot of work that has to be done in education. Actually, one of the guys who runs our protocol relations, he was a former educator, believe it or not. So he knows how to tell the narrative, knows how to speak to both an institutional audience and to a crypto native audience.
Yeah.
And you need that kind of talent around the table to be able to, I think bridge the gap, and that's really what we're trying to do.
How big is the team now?
We're a little under 20, but we're super lean. Part of that reason is because I brought a series of relationships that I've had the guy who runs our infrastructure, he built Cable and Wireless's global data center footprint. Like these are people that have done this many times. They've exited businesses themselves. They know how to focus on sort of the risk elements that large institutional capital cares about, and they also know how to drive costs down and sort of manage all the areas of the network layer.
Yeah.
When we first started the business, we realized that almost all the validator staking companies were focused on the protocol layer. So in my view, in order to effectively run this business over time, you need to manage the protocol layer, you need to manage the hardware layer, and you need to manage the network layer. All three of those matter. Now, and that's particularly because as chains get more and more complex and the demands and the throughput become more and more significant. You can see it today already on Solana a little bit,
Yeah.
but the new high throughput chains that are coming out demand it even more. And the first wave of validators focused on the protocol layer.
Yeah.
They went to Amazon, for the AWS, for the hardware layer and the network layer.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's revealed for us is we can do things like we can tell a customer where their stake is geographically. We can push a button and have their stake outside of the US or inside of the US or in Asia or wherever they need to have it specifically. Those are things that are much more difficult to do when you're on top of a cloud provider. But even at the more interesting layers, we can do things like change the actual physical network boxes to improve performance. We had one foundation where we were able to sort of transform the way that they were delivering the protocol by understanding, well, you had to use this particular IO card versus that one, like in those kinds of changes. You don't have the capacity to do that when you're at Amazon. They don't allow you to do that. That's not, their business is about, serving SaaS companies and others, right? And so as these protocols become more and more demanding, I think that we're beginning to see that the networking and hardware expertise we have is beginning to matter more and more and more.
It's interesting that you can do that from a country delineation because, like, as a trust company, we have 7 different trust companies globally, like 2 here in the United States specifically, clients in about 150 different countries, and we want our clients to be able to paper up with the entity that makes most sense to them. So the ability to actually allow those assets to be deployed in the regions of the world where it fits them best.
Right.
Now, as we move to more institutional, where it's regulatorily requires them to do that, that's really interesting.
And tax also, right? So we actually have a Cayman, we have a Cayman sub, and our international entities are through there. And those are the kind of things that, 2 years ago, to your question, like what was it like 2 years ago? I remember talking with a lot of people who, were running nodes and had a lot of stake. Like, why are you bothering to do this? Like, you have to buy hardware. It's expensive. Like, just spin it up in AWS, get it down. The chain moves on. Like, that was the philosophy, right? But I knew that things like SOC compliance would really, really matter, right?
Yeah.
So we started that process from day one because I know that U.S. institutions can't, they just can't interact with you unless you have those kind of things in place, right?
Yeah.
In many cases. So yeah, like I think that thinking through the legal regulatory traps and then applying that at a protocol layer is where we've been able to differentiate, in a world where, there are lots of great solutions. I think that there's a lot to be said for large customers. I'm sure you guys do this at BitGo, to diversify stake across multiple providers. Like in the era post FTX, everyone realized, oh my gosh, like singular parties in my supply chain are a problem, right? We offer something that's truly different from the others because at a physical layer, not only are we a diverse entity, but at a physical layer, we're totally diverse, right? So we don't touch AWS, we don't touch Azure or Hetzner or some of the other, hyperscalers.
It's interesting because, the reality is a lot of our clients use multiple custodians. We would love for us to be the only custodian. We feel that we fit the boat and we could be the only custodian, but even my personal assets, right? I have a couple of different banks I might work with or brokerage accounts, things like that. It's just diversification.
Yeah, we're actively, we're actively sort of promoting a multi-stake model. Because I think actually in the world, again, going back to my telecom roots, telecom networks and decentralized networks, they only work because you have a diverse mesh of providers that are all working together, right? And decentralization it's critical to that to have multiple operators, right? None of this industry would work if there was only 3 large providers, right? I think the world will evolve where there will be, something in the teens of consequential, sizable providers that all sort of compete and also work together in various ways. And that's exactly what the birth of the internet was like. I was there in 1997
Yeah.
when it was deregulated, when the internet sort of first was born, and that's what it was like then too. The same kind of thing,
Yeah.
So I think that we're headed towards that kind of a world.
And staking has been pinnacle for us because, custody does not work or custody fees typically don't exist in traditional markets.
Yeah.
There's stock repo, there's different things you can do. In this world, like if I hodl Bitcoin, that's very hard to actually build on that asset. You have to build custody fees ultimately.
Yeah.
Staking allows other assets to find ways to mitigate custody fees because there's a new way to deploy, and then we can take potentially a fee off that versus being a carry on the custody piece. So it's been very dynamic for us.
100%, right. It's an important part of the business, and we've, I think another thing that we did differently at GlobalStake is as we looked at, what I would call using maybe Web 1 technology, a channel partner. Like we look at Bitcoin as a channel partners. Like we're building the business from day one to sort of enrich an ecosystem of participants. It doesn't work. Our business doesn't scale if it's not economically relevant to BitGo or other supply chain partners to help us get there, right?
Yeah.
So we, architected our business model from day one with those kinds of things in mind. And I think that one of the reasons we can do that maybe better than others is older, we have more people with gray hair probably on average than most teams, but also because we control the entire stack, we control our costs at a very different level than others.
Yeah.
Others, I mean, obviously there are other providers that are trying to deploy or have deployed bare metal for parts of their solution, but almost invariably they have a layer of provider in between them at the bottom, so it affects their bottom line. There's more profit to be taken out of the value chain.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I believe is for certain here is if you want to build a durable business that's going to work long term, we all have to be prepared for, pricing pressure and everywhere, like businesses that scale, it's just what happens. And so, be prepared for the institutions to come. They're going to be demanding. They're going to, have requirements that your typical crypto company is not prepared to fulfill when it comes to sort of the business bureaucracy. But if you build something that's got real scale and durability, you're going to be the long-term survivor, right? So we think the bare metal option is a good variant to the rest of the marketplace.
It's an interesting take. It's a great take on understanding how you differentiate yourself. I mean, we're in Vegas. It's Bitcoin, right? And we're talking about proof of stake.
Yeah, exactly
proof of
right.
work, right?
Yeah.
So what brings you to Vegas specifically? And there's been a lot of talks about Bitcoin staking, restaking.
For sure, for sure, right?
What's your take?
So, as I mentioned at the beginning, I had a small fund called Silvermine where we've invested. And one of the areas that personally I was very focused on and we invested in is a lot of the Bitcoin L2s.
Okay.
So some of those actually evolved out of, proof of stake networks and other places where we are active. And I do believe that to Bitcoiners, I do believe that there's going to come a point in time where they realize that transaction fees need to settle. You need to generate transactions on the network in order to solve sort of long-term, dynamics around that network security. And so what I think we've been effective at being at the forefront of is some of these newer, Bitcoin yield type, solutions that are I would say semi-native today in terms of semi-native on chain. I think many of them are working with providers who are packaging interesting financial products but we're in the middle of, a lot of those discussions trying to frame a way to sort of bridge the world between what are essentially proof of stake networks on top of the Bitcoin network, right?
Yeah.
That's what most of the L2s are. And there's some real innovative stuff happening there. One of the things, again, having full infrastructure, having, full control over the hardware. We for example, we have a lot of storage infrastructure and GPU infrastructure, and that's beginning to matter more and more to these crypto meet AI kind of solutions, right?
Yep.
And so you just need to have, you need to be working with different tools, a pretty diverse set of tools, and that's easier when you have the team that can control the tools and has them at their own, disposal. Right?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's been interesting dynamic watching, where Bitcoin can evolve and how it can evolve in these layer twos. And we've in Vegas here, we've been doing some panels with everything from OGs that just went from how do we buy Bitcoin to the exchanges, to government officials talking about how they're enacting strategic reserves. Talk to us a little bit on that point. Like we just talked about, Bitcoin staking, these interesting things that happen, but what do you see as different ways to monetize holders? Because a lot of people who are at this conference today is about hodling the asset.
I think so. I think that what we see evolving, it's a slow process for sure, and I think that the Bitcoin as an asset now, I think, is sort of undeniable, right? And so what I believe is going to happen is that as institutions versus whale hodlers start to enter the space and control more of the Bitcoin flow, they're just going to naturally look for yield. That's what financial institutions do. It doesn't matter what the asset is, right? And so I think that that's going to drive a dynamic where there's going to be more attention placed on how can you generate yield with your Bitcoin. Now that could be as simple as, lending against your Bitcoin, right? But it could be more sophisticated things that migrate towards on-chain activity and true DeFi that looks every bit like the things that are happening in the Ethereum DeFi.
Do you think that creates too much embedded risk, though, in the sense that, like, versus just holding the asset versus now you're putting into something? Inherent yield sounds great, but there's always risk involved.
For sure, I think that it's certainly the perception of that by your traditional Bitcoiners, right? I mean, that is certainly the case. And I think at the end of the day, it's probably going to be a small percentage of Bitcoiners that actually operate in this stuff, right? At GlobalStake, our mindset is this is a very economically relevant asset class. There's a lot of innovation being built upon it. I'm not in a position to make a bet on which is going to be the winner, right? Is it going to be Bob or Meso or any one of these great protocols that are being built? But what I do know is that in order for this ecosystem, this crypto ecosystem generally to grow, you're going to need flashing lights and powered servers someplace or many places in order to make it all work, right? So we built ourselves with the mindset that we want to operate at that foundation layer, and it's going to move around a lot. 2 years ago it was everything Ethereum. Today it's everything Solana. In another year it'll be everything something else, right? And the value proposition, I believe, for us is being experts in how to handle the risk management behind custody and not custody, but management of customer assets, and the toolkit to navigate and operate your actual physical infrastructure in a way that ekes out additional increments of yield or provides customers with options to manage things from a regulatory perspective, et cetera, right?
When you said something earlier about moving fast and breaking things, you can't really do that with staking.
Exactly right.
Like as a custodian, it's our number one job to make sure assets are held as safely as possible.
Exactly right.
And obviously clients are able to deploy an asset whatever means they feel fit, whatever fits the portfolio thesis, all those sort of things. But ultimately, we still need to make sure that the security of the asset is there. So moving fast and breaking things, we can't do that.
It's funny. So it's exactly right. And I make a joke internally in our team. I say, we have to move fast and break absolutely nothing.
Exactly.
That's exactly. And they're like, what do you mean? That actually is, that actually is something we talk about internally, right? And it's just a different, and I think another observation I came out of the telecom world. There was a period about 20 years ago where I sat across from the CTO of Goldman Sachs, and we were a fiber company at that time.
Okay.
And we were offering a diverse solution, same kind of thing, right? This is, you don't have to only go with AT&T, you can go with us, here are the reasons why. And they unpacked the network that we had down to the actual conduit layer. They wanted to know every layer of the stack, and we're starting to see that from the more sophisticated enterprises as well. They want to understand exactly what you're controlling, and there are multiple choices here. I mean, it's not like you have to do everything in one place. But I think diversity is going to become a very, very big variable, and your capacity to, address things that banks care about, right? I mean, the banks have a whole nother set of regulatory requirements. But there's another thing I'll highlight is, and I know BitGo works with private. We actually cut a partnership with MG Stover, with Matt Stover, right, to integrate their reporting tool, Otto, and that I think is like a not sexy but a critically important variable in sort of delivering economic value to ultimate end user customers, because frequently they get reports from multiple providers, they can't reconcile the data. Integrating those things natively saves them money at the end of every quarter. Also, they don't have to pay the accountants to reconcile those kind of things, right? So just thinking about the kind of minutia that corporate accounting offices think about, I think is going to be more and more important, right?
And let's highlight that just for a quick minute, just for the listeners, because it's a pretty new product. And I'm happy to say that Matt Stover and Pat Clancy, the guys building that, are friends personally. Grew up, lived in Colorado. Matt's in Boulder.
Yeah.
I was in Denver, but I actually am not super familiar with what they're doing. I just know they're very excited about it. What's going on?
I mean, it's great. They've built sort of a data platform that reports all transactions, right? But in our case, in the narrow instance of staking, so they're working very, very diligently to build out a platform that captures the nuances of how on-chain transactions get reported, to create an audit trail that works not just for the crypto native who can piece it all together themselves and figure it out, but that works for a bank, right? Or and they just have totally different standards in terms of what they have to get to, right? So building out together with them the kind of integrated suite of reporting tools is just another example of sort of where I think the industry is going to have to evolve to, as opposed to click here for your CSV file that includes data that you can't even interpret, you don't know what it means, et cetera, right? So
So as we wrap things up, where do you see things need to go? Because as we see banks and other financial institutions getting more involved, to your point, you can't move fast and just break everything. It sounds like data is a big piece of it. What else are you guys working on?
I think data, business process is a big piece of it. So something that we did early on. So with business process, what I mean is the SOC compliance and those kinds of things, and ISO, those are critical standards to get into the conversation with serious institutions. Another thing is this is something we did early on, is we chose to build and operate carbon negative. So that matters actually to a lot of institutions that have ESG mandates. Like we're actually, able to check a box for them. That's really important. Tough to do in the data center world. So I think that those kind of business process elements, they may actually slow down, honestly, to the native crypto types, because that takes a lot of time to sort out, a lot of boxes to check, a lot of KYC, all those things are they just take time, right, to evolve. So I think we're going to see more and more and more of that. But I also think that the other thing that we're going to see is on the native on-chain side is the protocols that seem to be the most exciting ones evolving are high demand chains. They have lots of demand for either storage or IO or network bandwidth, et cetera. And a lot of the solutions being worked on today are ways to minimize latency on chains, et cetera, right? And so those kinds of things are the kinds of things that are native to those of us who are in the internet back when peering between large providers was the way internet traffic got settled, right? So we're excited about any project that's sort of active working on those kinds of network layer solutions, network and hardware layer solutions, because I think that's an area where we'll be able to shine, in particular. So it's a big mandate, sort of bringing all of those things together, right? But fortunately, we got, a team of people, a fantastic team that sort of blends the crypto native and the old school telecom, and we'll scale along with it. And really appreciate the endorsement as sort of one of the up and comers from BitGo to be working with BitGo. It's a fantastic thing. I think we can deliver a differentiated value proposition.
Well, we appreciate the partnership. We appreciate you coming, joining us here in Vegas. It's been a long week. It's still a few days left, but
it's super fun. We will get some Bitcoin L2 projects live soon.
Exactly.
Right? For sure. And then maybe we'll go to Potenza or next some of the other
I'm not making any commitments. Not doing that.
We're gonna push.
Well, thanks again,
Yeah.
Rich. Thanks everybody for listening. Another episode of From the Vault from Las Vegas. Have a good one.
Yeah, thanks a lot.